Okay, this is episode 25 of Narrative Wake. You know what, I'm tired. I'll just say some stupid crap. Like, if you were 25, like Narrative Wake, then you would be old enough to legally bet on esports pools in many different countries and domains, depending on what era of time this is. Perhaps in the future, they categorize 25-year-olds as still being teenagers, because in many ways, I know a lot of us when we're that age, we aren't really grown up enough, but we are considered responsible enough, and at the end of the day, gambling's all about being responsible. Not bad. I cobbled it together sort of halfway through there. I pulled myself out of a ditch there. And speaking of pulling ourselves out of a ditch and sort of cobbling it together and sort of trying to make it on in our lives, Kelsey Moser here, usual co-host on the show. Now, I've noticed, now you've sort of become... Here's the thing, Kelsey. This is the thing about you, okay? One of the things you specialized in, it's something I admired about you, actually, in your work, was a lot of people thought you were just a really brave individual who'd say whatever you thought, or they thought perhaps, you're someone who just has no biases, no allegiances. But what I actually know about you, Kelsey, is that you'd mastered a skill that all analysts truly desire to have, which is you became the detached observer. You were someone where there was no wins and losses for you. You just watched the game and you would just observe it, and then you would just judge like some universal figure outside of time and space what was correct and what wasn't, but from the pure ideal of the correct way to play League of Legends, forged in the pits of LPL, where so oftentimes we have been taught what is not the correct way to play it. But now the thing about you, Kelsey, is now you care. Now the beast has got, the heart has begun to grow. EU LCS matters now, right?
Oh, I mean, it always mattered, I wanted EU teams to generally do well. But yeah, I suppose now I'm not exactly as detached anymore, one would say.
Sure. Okay, so let's actually talk about this at the outset. Our guest here is Cabramaravilla. Won't be saying that again. So that's the end of that. And I'm only going to give that one shot because actually I think I should show people that I can't say that name. So I don't want to be dishonest. I don't want to do multiple takes for this, guys. That's not going to be a hilarious outtake at the end of the episode where we all laugh and then... Kelsey actually breaks character and talks in her real accent, because obviously this is a hilarious sort of Andy Kaufman-esque character that she does the whole time, where no one could really talk that way. Of course not. Don't be silly. But here's the thing. It's a very genius vehicle to deliver her analysis in, because if she really talked, and she actually has like a sort of Brooklyn accent, it'd remove the whole appeal, wouldn't have the same mystique around her as an individual. You'd realize she's just an everyday girl from Newark, New Jersey, So that's the way it could be. Like, Cabra, why do people talk so much shit on the EU LCS? Like, I've never really understood this, because here's the thing. People always tried to claim that, like, all the games are just a fucking clown fiesta and all that. Like, I realize, to the degree to which people are memeing, and sure, some of the people who often said that were people who watched, like, LCK, for example, where in general, yes, it's a bit cleaner in terms of how things are going. But why are people so down on the EU LCS?
I actually really don't understand this, because... when I was starting to watch the game, whenever I put an A on, and this was like, I started to watch the game seriously like a year ago, everything looked so much more messy than the EU LCS. Not maybe as much in the terms of macro, but I get the feeling that players are individually worse, and therefore they get very doubtful on certain situations and make some misplays, or maybe they start dancing for like 10 seconds when it really makes no sense to do so. So I really do not get where this like perception of the EU LCS is coming from, maybe because the bottom teams are usually shit, like very bad. Sure. Not in this case, of course, like H2K is a fantastic team with a lot of potential, but in general, when you are discussing the EU LCS, it's true that some teams do not have that much money, and oftentimes they don't even have a superstar or that much of a good coaching staff. So it gets really messy, and the only way to pull out wins maybe is like going for full team fight or weird aggro plays that they can pull off sometimes, and Sure. It looks super retarded, but I don't get the feeling that there is that much of a skill difference between any of the Western regions.
But here's the thing, though. I mean, you've actually just touched there on something which actually I kind of respect and always have in EU, is that I think the reason why in EU you always get like some mad upsets every split is because at least the teams who are bad on some level recognize we're not very good at this game. I wonder if there's still a way to win this particular game, whether indeed it is the top strategy or not, and then give it a go. So famously, we always used to have classic upsets from the old teams like Giants, etc., all throughout the ages. It didn't matter. Whereas actually one thing I always hated, utterly hated about the NA LCS is when like the 7th best team would be like attempting to correctly macro and play Baron fight. It's like, you can't do any of that. Like, you haven't even learned to ride the bike with the little stabilizers on. Why are you trying to do like a fucking wheelie and jump over a bridge? Like, that just won't work, will it? Like, you know, you're never going to come in first, but at least do something you can do. So yeah, I kind of buy that. Kelsey, what's your take on this? Like, by the way, we will add in a caveat just so we don't have to address this, that yes, there are a lot of bizarrely insecure NA LCS fans who just always have to like point out how shit Europe is and everything, and they'll do it, you know, in the face of all facts to the negative. So we'll ignore those people for now, because that's just an endless battle no one can ever win. But what's your take? Why do people try to make out like the quality level so low in EU LCS?
See, I don't necessarily agree with his take, because I feel like there's a lot more 5v5 mid lane team fighting in NA LCS than EU LCS. And I think that actually it might be the other way around, is that if you turn into an EU LCS game, historically it has felt like a lot slower. And to an extent that could be because the teams in EU don't necessarily know what to do here or there. And so that might make the games drag on. Like, the bad teams in EU generally don't lose very fast. They just kind of sit around and wait for an opportunity that almost never comes. So I think that could be why people look at EU and say it's shit. But I turn around and I look at NA, and I am watching them like constantly 5v5 force when they could get side lane control, and they could like split the siege so that the enemy team can't react to them very well, and they just never, ever are going to do that. So I think it's yeah, I don't know if it's because NA LCS has done very well in the marketing category, and so a lot of people just auto-defend NA LCS in that regard. But for me, I think that both regions have like huge problems. But I look at the way that NA LCS is ending their games right now, and it makes me very confused. So one of the things about this season of the EU LCS is, unlike some of the past seasons where there were just clear front runners, they just kept front running the whole time. You maybe had those like 2 or 3 teams who were like maybe like 4 to 6 who like, okay, let's see what order they come in and see how the meta affects them. Right now, every time I open the standings each week, I keep going like, what the fuck, are these upside down or something? What's going on here? Like, these don't even make sense. Like, even the teams that, like, okay, so a name that I like might recognize, like their team got worse and they're near the top now, right? Let's start, okay, right, Cabra, pick me one team to start with, and we'll start with one of the lesser teams. One of the lesser teams that's doing very well right now. So who jumps off the screen to you? Who do you want to pick to talk about first of all? Because let's start by giving credit to Giants Gaming and not Giants Gaming. You know, it's not like they have that fucking night guy just carrying the fuck out of everyone, and everyone's like, oh god, he's actually pretty good. And then Riot's like, shut it down, and they just kill the fucking lane swaps. Like, yeah, that we won't allow that. Right? How have Giants, with a lineup that quite frankly, this is a joke on paper. People were like so rude about this team when it was put together, being like, this is going to do nothing. How have they gotten all these wins?
One thing that really jumped to my attention when I was examining the old Giants that's now Vitality for a future piece is the fact that Ruin was someone that did not get a lot of credit for their play, but he actually absorbed a lot of pressure where he would be put in very like wonky matchups and given no attention whatsoever, but still through trading and individual mechanics, he would be able to nullify the pressure. So I think this guy, no one was really expecting a lot from him. And there's also the fact that, well, Betsy is looking better, but their support is Targamas, the name. Their new support really had some like cute plays on the tank bench, and they got a lot in a few games from just swapping with the Kench, using the ultimate to get a tempo advantage. And if the enemy team doesn't know how to react, this would usually get them out of the early game, and they are playing sort of easy to execute compositions with like maybe a point of pressure and some scaling, where if you die one time, it's not really the end of the world and you can still scale. So they are playing easy comps, and I think top laner and support were underrated coming into the EU LCS quite a bit.
Okay. So Kelsey, it's more than that. It's not just that people didn't expect much from Ruin. He's like a source of mockery. Everyone just only memes on the guy and makes out like he's a perfect example of the sort of Korean that most people are like, you shouldn't sign these players to the West. So are we seeing something different from him?
There are a couple of things to discuss with Ruin. Is I think that this is a meta that's very good for Ruin. In terms of, and the way the Giants are playing is very good for Ruin. The way that he described with the scaling and being able to take advantage of lane swaps and things of that nature, because Ruin is very much a tank top laner. He very much excels in this kind of like, I can hold pressure as a tank, and then there are a lot of tanks that are still very good in lane right now. And I can convert that in the map earlier. We can have good collapses in mid to late game, and then we can do well in the game that way. I think when there are more carry top laners in the meta, you start to see him default to things like Poppy and then scratch your head a little bit. The other thing to talk about with Ruin is that he's been in Europe now for a little while, right? So he's been able to like find ways to acclimate to the environment. He's found ways to improve, to get along with his European teammates. So I think that has helped him get a little bit better with each team that he's been on. So that's kind of the 2 points that I would stress with Ruin. I think that if we go to a meta with more carries and where you can't just play like a very safe, because right now, again, the meta is still very safe in terms of like having the stopwatches and the relic, which will change slowly over time. So I think once Giants have to work a little bit more on the early game, it might be difficult for them, because Joko is kind of a Joko. Let's put it that way. I think Targamas is like picking up a lot of slack in that regard, and you'll see the statistics like Joko jungle proximity really high. Oh my gosh, he's doing so much work. But he legit shows up to lane and it's like, oh, hi, how you doing there? No one even reacts. Yeah, so I'm not really seeing this guy doing a lot of work, and I think that like the sidelines are picking up a lot of slack in that regard.
Okay, well, what about this then? One of the more well-known players actually in this team is Betsy, obviously the old Gambit mid laner that people might remember. Now, right now, I feel like every analyst I hear talk about the mid lane in League of Legends right now, like first of all, the champions that are used there, not exactly champions where you're smashing lane and having like amazing outplays, not really happening. And so actually, I get the sense from most people that everyone thinks it's hard to actually gauge a lot of the mid laners right now. Like actually, even the bad ones get sort of propped up a bit, and people are waiting basically for the meta to change and some people to get exposed. Now, has Betsy actually looked decent so far?
He's fine. It's weird because it's okay to have a small pool, and a lot of times when you say that mid laners have a small pool, you don't necessarily mean that they have a small stagnating pool, right? You mean that they're able to competitively play like 1 or 2 or 3 champions at once. And since there are maybe like top 4 mids that we're seeing every game, if you have a small pool and you're not really able to like keep up with a lot of different champions, it's pretty good for mid laners like that right now. Also, I think the mid lane meta is really weird because like, especially starting at 8.2, we're going to see like everyone just TP mid or TP across the map, and there's not a lot of 1v1ing going on. So like a lot of champions that Betsy will play, which are just farm and scale, work fine. So
okay, right, Cabra, do you buy Kelsey basically there has just implied that a bunch of them she has question marks about, and she's kind of waiting for the meta to change, and then presumably some of this team will kind of go downhill a little bit, or other people will overtake them, whichever way you want to phrase it, however you model your glass and how much oxygen and how much water's in it. How do you see it? Like, do you actually think that there's something about Giants that can continue on? Are we seeing some like revealed potential here?
No, I think that all of the criticism is very fair, and even in like these lane swap scenarios, by principle, I disagree with most of them that I've seen. But because the teams are not good at reacting to the lane swap, they will actually get a turret, trade, maybe even get first turret, and then break the early game and like completely nullify any kind of laning advantages that the enemy could take. And also on the Betsy subject, because it's not only that the pool is very small, but in 8.1 at least, mid lane was super dependent on vision control around it, and because bot lane usually didn't merit a lot of control with the Targons and all that stuff that really you could not snowball into people. It was just like taking turns at controlling vision, and it was mostly like if you fuck up, you will lose mid, but as a mid jungle or even with the support of resets, but not necessarily you individually fuck up and then you lose the mid lane. So that's what I am also waiting to see, because I was not rating Betsy very highly coming into the split. I think he's looking fine, but I think him and other mid laners we will discuss in the episode are getting a lot from this situation.
Okay, right. Let's discuss actually before we go much further, because we haven't had this discussion on narrative weight before. So what are your actual thoughts, Kelsey, on the stopwatch meta? Like here's the funny thing. Everyone so overwhelmingly has been negative about it, against it, like it's ruining competitive play, needs to get out of it, etc. Right. Here's the thing. First of all, before we address like how it's used now, is the kind of mechanism behind this. Would this be okay, for example, if just say 2 people per team had it in a game, and it's not something that you saw every time and all over the place and it's so prevalent in that way? Could the mechanism be salvaged in that sense? Because I've seen very few people come out positively and say that they like anything about it, and partly it sounds like to me, partly because they think it just is having too radical an effect on the game. It's not just another part of the game, it's warped the game.
I think there are a few things about the stopwatch meta. One is that it was the stopwatch combined with the relic shield thing that made bot lane like really annoying to play around. And the other thing, so we'll see if it feels better going into this patch, but of course everything will be spellbook, so I don't really know. And then the other thing about it though is that if you look at the way that LPL uses it, it's actually very different from how people are using it in the West, because in EU or NA or something like, or even Korea, people look at the stopwatch and say, okay, well, you can't dive this lane. LPL looks at it and says, okay, we both have stopwatches. I'm going to dive you.
I've got a stopwatch as well.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to use my stopwatch to dive you. So it's actually really interesting. And usually the stopwatches are blown within like 10 minutes of them becoming active anyway. So it's an interesting take on stopwatch that I think could be fun to see. What other people experiment with. But yeah, I think generally if it was something that you could balance it a little bit better so that only 1 or 2 people were taking it per team or something like this, then I would prefer that overall.
Okay. Does that mean that, just as a follow-up, like, okay, I realize everything could have changed by the time MSI comes about, but if we had MSI tomorrow, would LPL potentially be an advantage in that sense? Would they use it in a different way that people wouldn't be anticipating?
I think it could throw some people off balance just because a lot of teams struggle to deal with things that they haven't personally played with before, right? So I think that could be something. And then at the end, even if they don't get anything off of doing it, everyone has burned stopwatches. We can move on to the next phase of the game. The problem with that is that it will still delay the pace of the game regardless, right? So even if you're diving with your stopwatch and you're using your stopwatch active to counter their stopwatch active, that's a dive that effectively still ended up being like a fulfillment of the status quo. And so the game still goes longer and you still have like the success of scaling comps. And I think that that's probably why we aren't seeing as much aggressive stopwatch that uses usage in other regions. So.
Okay. Cabra, come on then. What's your take on the stopwatch map?
I mean, I think the fundamental idea is reasonable, because I think one of the main problems of modern League of Legends is how strong push is and how much you can get out of vision control. But for me, the problem is that stopwatch stalls the game in a way that it doesn't feel very skilled or very fun to watch. I actually think one of the main ways in which the game should be balanced is to make it the better watching experience, not necessarily fair or whatever else. So because the game is going so late and dives are usually not reasonable to make, no one is making plays, and that affects the quality of the game a lot, and it ends up feeling unskilled as well, because the people are not going for the dive because they think it's not going to work, nothing is happening. So there is no outplay room. I actually think the idea is great, because I like anything that will give some sort of variety to that structure of pushing lanes and controlling the jungle. Maybe you want to try and scale with 3 losing lanes and not lose 95% of the games. But yeah, I think that the direction is good, but the implementation right now could use some tweaking, I feel.
Okay. Right, so another team that obviously had, I mean, it's beyond a joke to say an interesting off-season, is another team near the top of the rankings, is Team Vitality. Now, it was very easy for everyone to hate on this team, partly because of Gilius. Like, obviously, he brings it on himself, and people, there's a certain type of person wants to see him fail, and okay, understandably so. But when we had him on the episode, right, obviously, he has these players who were effectively rookies. Like, they're people who haven't had much experience, and you had to figure, okay, here's the thing. If someone says I'm going to put in like 2 or 3 rookies, I'll go ahead and say already, right, I reckon 1 or 2 of those probably don't make it. But as a result, yeah, probably 1 turns out to be good, turns out to be decent, right? Is Jizuke, is he some sort of revelation?
I don't think so.
I think he's also someone who's kind of getting a lot from Spellbook stuff, like especially his rise. So, I mean, for those of you who kind of watched the H2K game, it's like not a shock to say that, all right, so Jizuke immediately TP's top. Cajal tries to match instead of just like putting pressure mid, so that immediately opens the opportunity for Jizuke to do the same thing again, right? To just go top again because there's no pressure mid. And I would say if there's one thing in Spellbook, it's just about Spellbook, it's just that you're immediately you're just punishing mid laners not controlling mid very well, and you're not getting punished as much for dying. So you can take a lot more aggressive trades in general in mid lane if you have Spellbook mids, and you can not get punished you don't have to lose a wave if you die. So normally, like if you take aggressive trades right in the past, right, then what happens is you could die, theoretically. So if you take aggressive trades to get back in the lane, or aggressive trades when you don't have push advantage, then you die, and you not only die, but you lose your wave and you fall even more behind, and the game is basically over. Whereas with Spellbook, you die, you TP back into lane, you still get your wave, and it's not as bad. Just by no means, especially if you TP back in and immediately like go for an aggressive play and you kill them, right? Because they haven't had a chance to back and buy an item. So you get punished a lot more for not keeping mid pressure, and then also at the same time you don't get punished as much for being aggressive. And Jizuke is like really taking advantage of this as much as possible, and a lot of his aggressive trades and aggressive playmaking is really working out for him. So I think that people will kind of get used to playing against this eventually, and the meta will recalibrate potentially. But I'm really curious about like how he's playing right now. I guess let's put it that way.
So, okay, Cabra, how is Vitality winning these games? I mean, obviously, like one player they have who has always been hailed as a good player is Cabashard, and obviously you definitely can play carries in the top lane at this point in time. That's absolutely viable. How are they doing it? What are the factors that you see that have put them in this good position early?
The thing is that I think Jizuke is getting a lot from the fact that Vitality invests almost all of its resources around mid lane. They will usually draft like a wave clearing ADC, a roaming support. Usually Jack Troll on Thresh is pretty famous, but it's not as much his individual ability as the fact that when he is unlocked to roam into the mid lane, he will look to make those plays. And even as Giants, the only way they could really take control over games was camping mid lane or moving from mid lane into the side lanes. So they are drafting this kind of safe bottom lanes. They are constantly clearing vision around the mid lane, and then they are putting Cabochard on these winning matchups, and he will just roam mid constantly to look for ganks. So The thing is that this is very efficient in this meta because it's especially 8.1 was more counter pick heavy on the mid lane. You have into Azir, you can pick Ryze, into Ryze you can pick Malzahar, or you can even pick Zoe into Azir. A lot of stuff that if you are willing to save the counter pick for the mid lane, you can get an advantage. So if you combine this with picks like the Tahm Kench, which can nullify a lot of pressure on the mid lane with his ultimate, even gank. Gilius was playing a lot of Jarvan as well. They had a lot of kill pressure on the mid lane. So usually because they were investing so much vision, the enemy could not contest, and then H2K was open to roam. So I think the style of the team really, really matches the current meta, but they have also a lot of weaknesses, like Gilius it showed a bit today, Gilius is pretty bad at losing his jungle. He will actually overcommit a lot and waste flash or even die.
Okay.
Jack Troll is not really very effective if he cannot roam, so there's a lot of stuff that they will suffer, I think, in the future.
Okay. So another team where, I mean, I thought it started out as the fucking haters ball or whatever it is. Like,
at the same time, though, I remember on the Narrative Wake episode, like, I felt like this could be a team that ends up coming out of the gate fairly strong with, right? Like, I do think the fact that they've retained kind of their dynamic, but even when they had a different coach and a different staff, they had a very simple formula to execute, and they're kind of keeping with that. They're one of the only teams right now that's willing to play aggressively, and they've been having some success with that just because I think a lot of teams are reacting really poorly to it. So, I mean, like, good on them, I guess, honestly.
Are they a playoff team, do you think?
I mean, it's reasonable. Right now, it's really weird because I feel like almost any team could be a playoff team, depending on who gets their shit together, how the meta changes. But yeah, I could see them in playoffs for sure.
They have one thing that I think it's really important for like getting differentiated from the bottom tier teams, which is they are very, very decisive and very aggressive on their play. So this is not something you can usually teach. It's like they have balls and they are all on the same page usually. So I think this will be an advantage for them across all metas, and it can differentiate them from teams that maybe do not have clear shot calling, which I think it's the case with the bottom tier.
By the way, I can already tell you, spoiler for everyone for this season. Okay, I know you're all watching the show and you're thinking, how's it going to go? Right, spoiler. If this team places anywhere near the top 3 at the end of the split, they're going to give Yamato Cannon the fucking coach of the split. I guarantee you. That's just the way the narrative works. And here's the thing. I actually liked where he said that comment the other day. It was like the headline for one of an interview he did, where it was like, it said something like, I know more than most of the coaches in the West. Now, here's the thing that's good about that. I actually like Yamato Cannon in his own way. I think, like, he's got his own charm to him. He's clearly a charismatic guy. He also has, he's had some up and down results. He's had some teams that were decent. But what I love about that statement is, this is a lesson to all the coaches out there, is that too many coaches, actually have done a bad job because they naively think like players do. You know that classic thing that a lot of pro players will do? They'll say, oh, I let my play do the talking for me. Well, you can't actually do that as a coach because no one ever knows what you actually did. Actually, that principle doesn't work. Like, for example, Youngbuck won all those LCS splits, and the consensus is like, well, yeah, Mithy was the coach, and he's just like sort of like, what do I do now, Mithy? He didn't even get any credit for winning them all. So what I'll say is this: what's clever about what Yamato Cannon did there is he took a statement, which, first of all, not only could he not possibly know what he just said and that is true, because he can't remember what other coaches know, or for that matter, what they don't know. And even the ones he knows as friends. Let's say he gets a couple he knows. He doesn't know what all the NA LCS coaches do or do not know. But what's great about it is, it's an unfalsifiable statement. You can't also show that he's wrong. It's like, okay, I'll give you a little hint here because no one who watches CSGO is going to watch this podcast anyway. But a while ago, right, I was making my Twitter bio and I updated it and I thought to myself, right, I should put something along the lines of like, CSGO analyst or, CSGO expert or something. And then I thought to myself, I think I've mentioned this story before. I thought to myself, well, fuck it. I mean, why not just put #1 CSGO expert? I mean, first of all, again, unfalsifiable position. No one knows who that is. But technically, as long as I think I'm good, and I don't really know who the #1 is, could be me, right? So just go with it, right? And I'll tell you what's good about it is, even people who don't agree, because it's such a bold statement, it will get you way more publicity and attention just from that, because just them arguing, like, he says he's the bloody #1 analyst. Exactly. I've succeeded, haven't I? If I just said I know a bit about CS, you'd go, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's fine. Like, there's no discussion. So well played to Yamato Cannon for that. I mean, his team is fucking boring as fuck. Like I'll give props to Gilius. At least he's trying with the banter. Cabramaravilla is French, so as usual, just doesn't talk to anyone outside of French. And the other players in the team, listen, mate, they're like a newborn fetus. They can't even talk yet. Obviously, they just have to play the game. So I hope that this team at least kind of becomes more solid. I personally think they're going to be crap when the season goes on, but we'll see how it goes. Listen, you know me. Like, my approach to young people coming up in the world, okay? Listen, okay, people close to you, your support network, they should encourage you. They should tell you can go for it. You can do all these things. But the job of the world is to be this brutal Darwinian system which tries to destroy you. And if you can make it through that, you're probably incredible. But odds are, most of you are probably going to die. Basically, I think of Team Vitality and other teams like that. Like, those nature documentaries where it'll be like turtles that are born on the beach and then the tide goes away. And then, the whole episode becomes like, will they survive the gulls who come in at 6 a.m.? Like 95% of them are going to die. But the ones that make it, they're the only ones I give a fuck about. So basically, just words of encouragement for the people. Basically, EU LCS people, be the people that I end up caring about. Don't be the ones that are but memes for future episodes and people that we laugh at, because that's just horrible, isn't it? You don't want to be that kind of person. So, okay, speaking of people that I definitely don't want to be like, but also inexplicably are doing well. Team ROCCAT. Right, come on, Cabba. Explain this to me. What the fuck is going on? How is Team ROCCAT winning games? Because this is another team where I looked at it and I was like...
Okay, I actually have to take a look at my notes, because I think they have a very good for like a rookie sense support jungle duo. I really like it. Also, there's the fact that HQ has maybe not been the best of laners at times, but because there's the Targon's meta, that kind of just washes away. And to be fair, the G2 game they won was like very hard trolling from G2, not only in terms of just going for aggressive plays that made no sense 24/7, but also drafting that Skarner into Veigar, which is not really like, as a Skarner, you usually have to be able to reach the enemy team. And if the enemy team has Veigar and Tam Kench, you are really not going to do anything. So I feel like G2 has some identity issues and cockiness maybe. And yeah, they are kind of stealing wins a bit. I get the feeling. Okay,
listen. Even if I grant that premise for G2, they've beaten a lot of good teams, mate. They've beaten most of the teams that people thought were going to be the top of the EU LCS.
But now they're the bottom, right? So who are the good teams?
Yes.
Dude,
so basically what you're saying is...
credit for
yes,
beating?
Exactly. Listen, until you can beat Giants Gaming, just get the fuck out my face. Until you can show that you're top tier like that, I mean, yeah, you're right. Everyone can beat G2. My mistake. What was I thinking? No, okay. There must be... What are they doing right here, Kelsey?
The ROCCAT team? So yeah, I think they're another team that's kind of surprising people in terms of like what they're showing up with and doing early game. Like Memento keeps playing this Camille jungle shit, and people aren't really reacting well to it. Like there will be like some bad positioning in lane, like he'll gank lanes that are winning, right? Which it seems counterintuitive a little bit. So he'll gank like when the enemy lanes are winning, and then he'll just like come in with some super aggressive jungle pick and just blow them out. And
I mean, his jungle pool at the moment is just wild, right? Didn't he play like fucking Jax in one game or something?
And he'll just like play like this super in your face kind of style against lanes where it should be like a risky gank, right? And then because it's best of one, people don't come back and adjust to, oh, okay, well, we know this is going to happen when he backs, so we'll do this. I think the other thing is like he said with the G2 setup, like G2 didn't play their comp correctly at all. So like where they should have gotten pressure, they didn't, like the Jarvan Rise lane. They just didn't play around that at all.
Oh, yeah, I'm actually mistaking games. That's right. Yeah. They were playing Jarvan Rise, and Memento did like the counter gank.
Yeah. The G2 game you're thinking of is I think the one that they played. What game was it? Because that was a G2 game that you're thinking of, but it wasn't against ROCCAT. But the thing is that so I think that's part of the issue as well. So I think, I don't know, like it's just, they're a really interesting team because people talk about how good their vision is all the time. the EU LCS and analysts talk about how good their vision is, and they ward a ton. So like their ward isn't necessarily efficient, but they are able to kind of identify where to go early on, and they don't necessarily get punished for losing the gold because the game scales really well. So, I mean, obviously they just lost to Giants playing like some of this very, very over-aggressive sort of style, right? And that will bite them in the butt as well, because like they turn it up to 11, right? And come out of the gates doing this, and then they just start losing at a certain point. And so I think we'll see more of that as people play and are more exposed to ROCCAT. But right now, I think it's working for them, yeah.
But how does this work, though? Because that's the thing. When everyone complains in every region about how slow the game is and you can't do anything early on, how is this like, I mean, pretty ballsy style from Memento? How is this approach actually working out now?
It's like I said, you have kind of a double-edged sword almost, because you can either play super aggressive and not get punished for dying, or you can play super passive and not get punished for. It's almost like the early game, whatever you do is completely nullified.
Right. At
a certain point, because if people are using their stopwatches correctly. So there's the skill element of the stopwatch right there, is that you can use it properly. The early game doesn't matter. But so I think that.
Was this designed secretly by Weldon Green or something? What the fuck's going on? This is true League of Legends. Okay, sound.
But yeah, I think it's just like really the element of surprise is really working for them. So this is like a team that I don't even think is a meta issue. I don't even think it's anything like that. I just think right now the meta element of surprise is like really, really good for ROCCAT. And so this is a team that might fall down as time progresses regardless. So we'll see.
Okay, Cabra, when this team was put together, this is a team where I actually feel like ROCCAT themselves at least knew the score, because whenever they started talking about it, they used all the classic terms. That, like, you know, when I do my translation of, exactly, I do all my translation, we're trying to develop players, you know, we give this player a chance. It's like, what you mean is you didn't have the money to buy any good players, or the good players were like, nah, I'm going elsewhere, mate, don't like your team. So clearly they put together whoever they had, and then, listen, there was a concept to it. They did try with the Koreans, and they have mixed it in there. So, okay, maybe they tried something that wasn't just like, just get bad players, but who's actually looking legit out of the players? Who actually looks like they might have a future, and maybe they're showing that they're going to be good players even?
I like Norskeren. Yeah, I like him. I think his positioning in teamfights is quite decent for a rookie, and he had some good showings. And I really rate highly the ability Memento is showing to kind of get a read for what the enemy jungler is going to try and do. And he will have these, like, for example, in the game against G2, it's weird for me that a rookie can do this kind of stuff, but he was really smart about how to play the Zac into Jarvan matchup and how to have threat into the Jarvan and control the mid lane vision. And also in the Splyce game, he had a really cute positioning where the Niski face checked as a seer and he got fucked. And even though Memento ended up dying, that completely turned the team fight around. So I think the sub jungle is very promising in this team, but as for the other players, I'm not sold on them.
Yeah, and the thing about Memento is that he isn't exactly a rookie. He's just been in bottom tier teams, like a lot of players.
Just no one noticed he existed.
Yeah. Yes. Like he was actually in the Giants roster in spring last year, and then
okay.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
Yeah, exactly. I think Memento's early game is, like, the thing about Memento is his early game jungling and decision making is really good. But sometimes I feel like post 20 minutes or 30 minutes, he just shuts off his brain. And then he just continues to be super aggressive, and this punishes them in team fights. And this is something I even kind of joked with him a little bit when he appeared on Narrative like the first time. But so he's a little bit aware that it exists as well. So.
Okay. So another team that, like, admittedly, this is a team that people sure thought was good, is Misfits Gaming, where they made these moves where a lot of the off-season moves they made were sort of, I would just say, like, sideways moves. They were sort of like, right, get someone who's vaguely similar, cool, let's try and just keep going with what we were doing. But in theory, I mean, on another level, if they had have ever been able to carry over any of the things they did at Worlds, which obviously I was like super skeptical of, in theory that should have made them actually a top team immediately, because we've already seen there was other teams that had dodgy lineups who were top teams, and there were teams that actually looked like they were in trouble anyway. Right? What have you actually made of Misfits thus far? Because it seems like they are all over the place in terms of like player performance, for example. Like, you know, they've had wins, but are they ready to assert themselves and be a top team? If some of these others we're talking about are going to fall away, is this going to be the team that's legit?
I think Misfits actually got a bit fucked by the meta in the sense that Hansama and what's the name of the supporter?
Mikey X.
That's right. They are very good on the 2v2 sense, but that doesn't really translate on the Targon's meta. They also, when they are playing like a sort of quote unquote easy comp where side lane control is very easy to get, mid and top lane control is easy to get, and then you have good team fighting, so it's not that hard to gain control of the enemy jungle. They looked very clean, but when they had to play the Zoe, I wasn't really sold on how they were executing the composition. I thought they were very doubtful at times and kind of fumbled the rotations, which is what we should be expecting from Misfits, because Hussein has always stated that he likes to work in improving the team, not necessarily trying to win every match. So I think the team right now is looking like it's developing a new identity. They are putting Senkox often in quite bad spots and trying to play through other lanes, oftentimes bot. But I think they will come together and be a very, very strong contender for the finals. Or well, the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean the thing about Misfits is that they came in with like a really terrible read the first week.
Yeah,
they were playing like a really terrible read on the meta, and it wasn't
dive, baby.
Yeah, they kept trying to force dive bots, and they would get stuff for it. Like they were playing almost like an LPL style. They would get stuff for it, but they would also always lose stuff for it. So it again ended up being like not very efficient. The other thing about Misfits is that I like look at like game board setups and stuff like this, is that I think that they have a pretty good idea in terms of how to set up for Baron. Like I actually think they set up for Baron very well, and they set up for mid-game very well, but they have certain conditions that are holding them back from like doing well in side lanes, like you mentioned. So, I mean, I think Misfits are going to be a very good team, and they seem like a very legitimate team. Just they are a little bit hard to completely 100% gauge right now, because they did come in the first week, and their first week was really puzzling in the context of the game. But I think just in terms of solid fundamentals, like Misfits probably are the best in terms of solid fundamentals.
Do you buy kind of what he was implying there, that basically when the meta switches, you can actually do something in the bot lane for the first 20 minutes, then they will they will come from strength to strength?
I mean, I'm not as high on Hansana's laning, but I think that, and I'm curious to see like who sort of leads that lane, because I'm not sure if either of them do. But I think that they are one of the better bot lanes in Europe right now. So I do kind of buy it, yes.
Okay, since earlier you addressed the game where they played against Zoe, right? I want to know about this. Okay, so this is another example of where people just have like a mad hot take that they apply universally until they see facts to the other way, which is that Zoe's just like every new champion. It's so busted and you can't play it. And it's true in a lot of regions. It is massively pick ban. Like the percentage is like way up. Like in like LCK, it's almost like 100%. It's one of those ridiculous ones that are. But in the EU LCS, when people actually get it, they've been losing most of the time. So is there some explanation there? What's the scenario? Why is this as busted in competitive play as people make out? It's still massively pick banned, but is it actually as dangerous as people think?
I think the deal with Zoe is that it's a champion that requires a lot of coordination to be able to set up once you take up the outer ring of turrets. It's not necessarily easy to play. And it can also be hard in like certain supports like Tam Kench or Braum. So if you are facing one of those matchups, you usually have to be very smart about how you control the jungle and prepare for taking the Baron. And since team are mostly new and the EU LCS is not very good at macro in general and this kind of setups, I think this is what's making the pick look bad. I think the champion is good, but the more coordinated you are, the better the champion will be by a long shot.
Okay, what do you think, Kelsey?
I think Zoe is very good in pick settings, where getting a pick is going to do a lot for you. But if everyone is going to just like TP mid, group up, it's a little bit harder to make that stick and to follow up on when she gets a catch or something like that. So I think that's annoying. The other, there are a few other annoying things about her for sure. And like a lot of it is just kind of surviving, being ganked early, or poor positioning in order to scale really, really well and then be able to get those picks. A lot of teams just are building Mercury's treads against her, and that makes it harder for her to like execute her combo. The annoying bullshit thing about her is the fact that she can miss her trouble bubble and still do a ton of damage. And I think that that's probably the most annoying thing about her, but the rest of it I think is manageable.
Okay. Right, if we talk now about Fnatic, this was a team that came in, and understandably, everyone said this should be one of the best teams, actually, because they retained most of the team. Most people actually even thought they'd got an upgrade by getting Hylissang, and that would open up some new vista of possibility in the team. Obviously, they have the same coaching staff, and then they brought in Youngbuck as well. There's all these reasons as to why it should be going well. Now, it's not going terribly, and it is so early in the split. Yeah, they could still be the number one team. It's not over yet, but the way they've been taking some of these losses, like I saw like the Vitality game, for example. Yeah, these aren't great games to lose. Like, these are quite depressing. And I will say, by the way, everyone in Fnatic, you brought this on yourselves when you were winning in most of your teams, where you started like apologizing to your fans for every loss. Because enjoy having to do that every single fucking week and give like heartfelt Facebook posts, you know, where you talk about like, not get knocked down 6 times, get up 7, or like whatever garbage you have to do. But you made your own bed on that one, so now lie in it. But I don't know, because here's the thing. On the one hand, like I say, it's not the end of the world. They've had good wins, they've had losses, but some of the way they've lost did look like, fuck, if this is a team that's been together for a while as well, at least a lot of these other teams are talking about, you know, their new lineups, so they're figuring things out. Aren't there some warning signs, say, Kelsey?
Yeah, I'll say. I said good things about Misfits Baron setups. I don't have good things to say about Fnatic's. That's kind of like, we got away with playing a really kind of silly comp against them. And yeah, like, because their hold on mid to late is bad. I don't know. Fnatic is a weird team right now, for sure. They need to work on understanding like when they can get vision and how to get vision depending on what their composition is, and that will help them a lot if they just like kind of go over that sort of setup in mid to late game. I think that will fix a lot of their problems, but it's easy to say that. Not as easy to kind of execute it and apply it, so yeah.
Okay. So Cabra, like I said, you really do have to set it up with the context like that. Like, you can't unfortunately judge Fnatic like every other team, because yeah, they have retained most of their players. Remember, these were like all LCS players last split. These are players where some of them are legendary players already. Reckless Soaz, Caps is obviously considered one of the top talents. Like, there's really no excuse to be starting off bad. So in what areas are Fnatic having problems? Have they been exposed in some sense?
I think the theme about Baron control extends also to like Fnatic's vision control over the whole game. And I think Broxa has improved in that area, but they were notably a lot of synergy problems at Worlds. And the thing is that Broxa has taken kind of a Wolf-esque approach of just, okay, I'm going to go through mid lane, ward super deep, and just provide vision for Caps. The problem is that the placing of the wards doesn't necessarily make sense in the 2v2 matchup they are playing. Like, for example, his deep warding against a Zac, where usually the problem against Zac is you want to ward back in the river, but just close enough so that you cannot get counter-ganked. But this is not happening. He's just warding camps. Like, there is no value to that. And also, I think Fnatic as a whole doesn't really understand how to use resets to then renovate this vision. They will get the vision, they will be safe for like 2.5 minutes, 3, but then maybe they will greed for one more wave, or they will greed for one more camp, and then Caps is fucked in the mid lane. And because he's like this very talented mid laner, he's constantly getting advantages, but if you're pushed up and you have no vision, you will get spanked. And this is what happened in the in the Vitality series, if I remember correctly, and is like a common weakness they are constantly showing. And I've seen a bit of improvement from Broxa, but I'm not still sold on their like overall comprehension of the subject, which is really complex. I'm not blaming anyone, but I think it's a big weakness.
Okay, so Kelsey, one thing that we have to address then in that sense is let's contrast them against obviously almost the same team playing last year. So last year in each of the splits, they had their own problems, they had their own flaws in terms of their approach to the game. Right? Is this just a lineup that looks like it's never going to have like the perfect chemistry? It's always going to have some sort of like wonkiness to how it operates, and then they're just going to kind of work around those problems and then win. Do you think they can come together and somehow fix this in the next few weeks and there'll be no problem?
You remember in spring, this team was not doing well, right? Initially, it just was not doing well. And it took them a really long time to figure out like kind of a Band-Aid fix. And then that Band-Aid fix almost sort of got them through the entire year until they faced Misfits in the summer playoffs. And now I think people just kind of understand how the Band-Aid fix works, especially after watching them at Worlds, especially after everything else. And so maybe it works for them sometimes. It's not going to work for them now, especially like, again, this is another team that isn't going to get leads diving bot lane, right? So I also think that Hylissang is limited in different ways from Jezz's. Let's put it that way. Like Jezz's had obviously had problems, but I think that Hylissang's like over-aggressive tendency and the fact that he doesn't always play like he doesn't always execute the types of champions that will win lane really hard. Like he's much better at having Rakan threat and then making it hard for you to ward river because you're afraid that his Rakan will come out of nowhere and kill you. Like he's not necessarily going to be the laning support that Reckless wants, and they're not necessarily going to generate the same advantages even out of Stopwatch meta from bot lane dives. So yeah, I think that the Band-Aid fix they had, it's a combination of people understanding the Band-Aid fix they had more before now and it not working as well right now just because of a lot of different factors as well. So
one thing I thought was interesting about the Hylissang pickup is that Fnatic, when they were showing a lot of their problems in Worlds, it came usually from the fact that they cannot set up this Baron control very well, so they needed some sort of hard engage and just go for it. So I think that if you are resigning yourself to being like, okay, this lineup cannot be converted into a Misfits style team, you might as well just pick people that have very good engage sense and are comfortable on those champions and maybe try to run it through individual skill and team fighting. So I think that pickup is pretty reasonable.
Okay. Right, I realise, again, unfortunately, with the meta that exists currently, it's very tough to really, like, criticise individual performance and be like, right, where's this person who's the star player is not doing X, Y, and Z? But in this team, has it changed, Kelsey, in terms of the fact that, okay, in theory, the guy whose job it is to be the star and who is set up and who wants to be the star is Reckless. And as you say, maybe the pickup hasn't worked out as hoped. Meanwhile, it doesn't matter what Soaz wants. Soaz will always be forced to play as he is forced to play. That's been his life. He signed up for that about 3 years ago when he didn't just quit the game like he could have done or go for the easy check. But then the guy who was always in the middle of the equation, I mean, literally and figuratively, he's always Caps. And Caps, every time I watch him play, one thing I kind of like about him in a way is he just seems to play however the fuck he wants to play anyway. And then it doesn't really matter. I mean, for good and for ill, essentially, you know. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's not. Do they seem like they have the identity aspect down in this team now?
No. I mean, I still think that they don't really have an identity. They had one that was working for them, and now they have to find a new one, I think. So.
Because, you know, that's always the big concern. Like, okay, I'll even tie this into a larger general meta point. So one of the reasons why I would agree with Cabra that the macro looks pretty bad this split is because you're getting all these teams that should have never been at a position where they had the chance to do any macro, getting there because of the way the game's going. And then, yeah, a lot of them don't know what the fuck they're doing, or they misplay, or they actually have a slight lead and then they fuck it all up, which looks even worse than when you make the bad decision when you're behind. Now, in the same sense, I actually feel like, for me, one of the problems this Fnatic core has had the entire time they've had the team is exactly what I just said. They themselves have never been forced to sit down and identify what is the core principle of this team? Like, who is the player that we're going to cater to in this sense? Who in general are we going to run things through? Who's going to get the priority most of the time? What they've been able to do is what I actually think on paper sounds great, which is like, we've got all these superstar players. We can do it all. We can do anything. Well, the problem with being able to do anything is, yeah, you can do anything. That means you can do the wrong thing all the time. You can make the wrong decision every single time. You know what? Sometimes it's actually better when you just have the one player where it's like, well, we've got to do it through this guy. You at least know what you're doing there. You know which way your bread's buttered, you know. I feel like this is something where I have to add in as well, the personalities of these three different players probably couldn't be a worse combination of three different players to have those personalities if you wanted this to resolve itself naturally without a coach or someone coming in and being, right, we're doing it this way. Because Soaz is the most passive-aggressive player ever. I love it in its own way, but he's so passive-aggressive. Reckless is just someone who's like he's emotional in all the wrong ways. Like, if you can be an emotional, and you know that saying we have in English where you wear your heart on your sleeve. If you do that in the right way, you'll actually get people to follow you. People will be like, fuck, that guy's like my captain, I'll follow him. The problem he has is he does it in a really weird way where it's just a bit like, there's something a bit repulsive, I'm afraid, about when he's very, very emotional that way. You just feel like, why is it coming out in this way, you know? So that doesn't really win people over. And then Caps really is just the guy where he's just too young. He's not really a rookie, but he still has that vibe about him compared to the others. As I say, he's a little bit selfish in some ways. I don't really see where the leadership is in this team, quite frankly.
Yeah, that was something that they acknowledged even with the last roster. And you can sort of see where Hillsong might come in and be a leader, because people said that he was a bit of a leader for Unicorns of Love. But I feel like that's more in a way of he had some command of how the team played, right? Okay. Whereas I don't think that Fnatic are kind of willing to give him that. And it's not necessarily a leadership in terms of like being a very confident person who can put all of these characteristics together, because he is also someone who doesn't like the limelight very much. He doesn't like that kind of like central role. So I think that it's difficult to find someone who's just going to come in and say, okay, stop being like whining pussies or something like this, and this is like what we're going to do, or this is how we're going to resolve the situation. So yeah.
And I think it's actually even more confusing, the identity, than maybe the public perception is, because one thing that we're always talking about how Soaz gets no attention, but there's almost like this thing on the team where between minute 5 and minute 8, Broxa has to go top, take his worker card, top lane gank, whatever the situation is, whatever the matchup, it won't change anything.
There we go, yeah. You got
It's Enjoy like, okay, I will play Cho'Gath every game, but you have to fucking gank for me, even if I'm playing against Maokai or whatever shit like that. So they end up losing as well a lot of pressure on the map. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think the identity is all over the place with this team.
Okay, because I mean that's one of those areas where it's an intangible. It's not going to show up on the actual score sheet, but that's one of the reasons why I'm actually quite worried about this Fnatic team. Like, I still think with the quality they've got, listen, they could do another Band-Aid fix. They could get it together. They could have a playoff run. But I would never pick this team to be the number one. Like, I was actually amazed by how many people on that episode before used the logic that I set up with the context of they've kept the same lineup and they've done these moves. I was like, I don't know where you're seeing this, guys. You remember this team themselves had all those problems last year. Okay, let's talk about another team then. And actually, let's keep it on the same theme. Let's talk about a team that, had some reasons as to why they might be very good, but obviously has had their issues. Let's actually skip straight to the G2 Esports conversation. Now, obviously, one thing I do like, Cabra, this is one thing I have a certain schadenfreude for, is I really enjoy it when people get really easy shit narratives, but then another really easy shit narrative sort of rams it. So it's kind of like, when the Velociraptor was about to kill the kids at the end of Jurassic Park, which, by the way, what an amazing end to the movie that would have been. That would have been a fucking amazing end to a movie. Velociraptors just tear apart a bunch of kids because the kids, they did their best. They tried to escape. They're just fucking kids. They don't know how to strategize, etc. Half of them were stupid idiots. They were just hiding above the ceiling while just poking its head up. You know what? If at the end of the movie they'd just been torn apart, you'd have ended it like, fuck, how dark. It's like it's almost like a George Romero zombie flick. There was no way out. Fuck, what was humanity thinking? Bringing back the Velociraptor. But we all know what happened, right? Inexplicably, the T-Rex just saved them, but then also didn't kill them. Again, also another chance to make a good movie there. Nope, another movie ruined by Hollywood. So anyway, apart from my sidebar there about Jurassic Park and why actually it's quite an inferior ending to a movie, and fuck everyone who says otherwise, is in this scenario, okay, it would have been so easy for people to say, you know what, Sven and Mithy, they were the team, weren't they? They've left. But you know what? Well, let me just change channels. NA LCS hit. Oh, shit. Oh, well. Oh, that's a shame, right? So apparently, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe these guys just somehow covered all each other's weaknesses. What the fuck's going wrong with G2 Esports, Cabra? It looks like a train wreck.
Yeah, it does. And actually, I think that talking about G2 after Fnatic is very suiting because I feel like they are struggling a lot to, again, find their identity because I get the feeling that Hjarman and Guadid come a bit with the mindset of the old ROCCAT where it was like, okay, either I carry or we get fucked. So I have to play aggressive. I have to go for the plays. And meanwhile, Perkz, obviously there was all this narrative about G2 only playing for the late game and trying to play sort of passive, get like vision advantages. And Jankus, who even though he was fantastically aggressive before, he was actually putting a lot of tracking junglers and playing as well for the late game on H2K, which ends up that if you're playing nuclear, maybe you don't want to go late game. But aside from that, I think that the very clear problem is that you have a top lane carry and you have a mid jungle duo, which should be like your superstars that do not have a lot of synergy, but also are more in a not as aggressive of a mentality, maybe like when they were playing the Rice Jarvan duo, they never tried to like flash EQ, go for a kill, and maybe try to control the game through Perkz. Meanwhile, bot lane, the Hjarman did that fighting 2v3 whenever, like they just feel like it. And Wunder is sitting top lane. I actually think he's doing fine, but he's irrelevant to the overall outcome of the games. So I think that maybe this team, the problem is that they will need to work together, like maybe a month and a half extra to really figure out their identity, because there's also the fact that Jankos is doing some weird invades that look very aggressive, where he's sort of like maybe testing the limits of the coordination of the team, but he ends up losing either vision advantages or kills, and overall putting the team pretty behind when situations where they really should be ahead from setup.
Okay. What do you think, Kelsey?
Yeah, so it's weird because they should be playing to mid, and they have this weird setup where they are playing kind of to bot in the early game, in the sense that they want to convert, like they want to play from blue side and they want to convert bot lane pressure into blue buff, and then they want to get the blue buff and get the blue buff control so that Perkz can carry the game that way. But then if you go to the red side games, they're playing to control enemy blue buff and they're ganking bot. So I don't really, they seem a little bit confused and almost stuck in like a very defined formula that isn't working for the existing team. And then more troubling is that if they get set behind, they don't really seem to have a way to figure out what they're doing outside of getting picks. And if they can't get picks, they're like too afraid to force anything. So yeah, I think they're just like a really confused and lost team right now. And like maybe they figure it out, maybe they start shooting up again. But I think it will be really hard for them. I think unless they start playing to, as he said, the top side, and start looking more at the top side as an objective or as the ones that are going to sort of carry you, I think this G2 team will have a really hard time. And a lot of people have been criticizing their bot lane, right? Because even if like they have the jungle is around their lane a lot, they have trouble like winning matchups. They have trouble playing aggressively or getting good setup in the 2v2. They have trouble executing team fights in mid games. So yeah, this is a difficult team to balance, I think, the way it is now.
I just want to say, I want to take this moment, okay, to acknowledge and recognize, like, welcome to the EU LCS, Perkz. I know you thought you were playing in the EU LCS for all these years. You haven't. You've never played in the EU LCS. What happened is you came in the first split, and while I'll acknowledge the lineup you had that first split, yeah, it wasn't that great a lineup. So yeah, lots of props to you and Trick for being able to pull it off and win. Great job. But Everything went well from day one. You were doing really great. It was all fantastic. Then you just upgraded the fuck out of all the positions and got all these like you got the most ridiculous upgrade in the bot lane like you could even ever imagine. I still don't know how they pulled that off. Shout out to someone's mum somewhere at some company. The MVP of that trade inadvertently. But anyway, we all know what I'm talking about. I just leave that as an Easter egg, right? But here's the thing. From then on, even if there were like problems, it was like, yeah, all right, problems, okay. So basically, you're 2 weeks away from actually figuring out how to be the best team again. Great, this is brilliant. And then obviously, yeah, you were best in the best of X series, and you could always kind of rely on when we get to that phase. It was the old Fnatic move, like as long as we get to the best of X series, then we beat these teams anyway, and all these one victory they had of us don't really matter. But now you're experiencing what it's actually like to play in the EU LCS. You know what? It probably looked really funny when that shit Elements team was around Froggen, and when H2K was on like sort of the busted up Origin, and it was like, what's going on here? And you know, you saw all these other great players, and you were sort of like, that'll never happen to me. It's like, yeah, it never feels like it will until it's you, does it? You know, but when it does, and then you know what? All of a sudden, you're checking your own portfolio. What the fuck? My stock's going down. What's going on here? Yeah, guess what? You don't get what's great about League of Legends. I've noticed is it's kind of like capitalism. The further down you go, the harder it is to get back up again. Like once you're doing really well, everything accumulates, it gets better and better. You've got more resources, you spread those around more, you're winning more, everything's going great, everyone values you so high. Therefore, because people value you, great players want to play with you even more. You're getting even better teammates, you're getting even better It's all great. But you know what? Good luck getting out of that spiral, mate, because when you're in that fucking spiral, there's a lot of great players don't come out of that one. So all I'm going to say is, now is where chapter 2 of the Perkz story begins. And I'm looking forward to it. This fucking middle act is getting spicy as fuck. And all I want to know is this. Here's the thing. This is the move that we're all waiting for, okay? If he has to retire from Twitter after an EU LCS split, that's where we're in trouble, boys. If he has to actually take a break during that middle period, that's where we're fucked. Okay, I have to ask this question. I know it's obviously an unfair question because we cannot possibly know. We can but speculate. But you know what? This show in a way is sort of about speculating and sort of about talking sometimes about things we not only do not know, but cannot know, because at the end of the day, that is a fun thing to talk about. So one thing you have to factor in as well as the players is they have a new coaching staff. They have Grabs, who came over, obviously was in much worse teams in the past. Does it look as though he's having trouble with this new lineup?
I'm not sure if he's having. It's really, yeah. I have no idea.
Remember,
like, it's really hard.
One of the storylines, obviously, was that in theory he was going to have automatic, because he had some of his old players in Kiana, etc. That was going to be a boon for him, right? But has it not really worked out so far?
I mean, I don't know if it's a coaching thing or if it's like what exactly is going on. I think there are a lot of pieces that are having difficulty fitting together. I think he probably has a very different approach to how he wants to play compared to Perkz, because like the Perkz style was very different from, or the G2 style is very different from the ROCCAT style, and Perkz is probably like the voice that is sort of having a lot of power within the organization right now. I'm not really, it's really impossible to say. Like, I don't even want to speculate what's going on behind the scenes because I have zero idea.
It seems like a pretty hard situation to have, because it's not like you have your old players and then 3 other guys that have never had a real coach and they have like a cheerleading guy. No, like Jankos has played with Broly for 2 years and he already stated that he thinks Broly is a genius and he has now his very strict model of the game. On the other hand, Perkz has played with Mithy for a year and a half, and Mithy is also famous for being very knowledgeable, and they also had like their very specific approach that even though they at the beginning were aggressive, they shifted and went like, no, okay, we're going to play for scaling and control of vision and being a more sort of Korean style team, even though I know the Korean style is like a meme. But maybe if you are like a coach that has this situation, it might not be easy to get these players to buy into your model, because just by human nature, you will know stuff that they don't know and vice versa. So if the players see you making mistakes in stuff that for them is obvious about macro or maybe wording or these kinds of stuff, it might be hard to get everyone to buy into a single model that has an obvious structure to the team.
Okay. One thing I have to say from watching this team, and in fact from watching the guys in Splyce as well, when they had the Danish lineup in Splyce, I realize that technically Mikey X obviously isn't Danish, but it was the majority Danish team, right? The more I've watched that team since they were a good team, and since they've now split apart and they've all gone to these different teams, I have to say, it's a classic example of where it's so tough to give credit properly when a team is good, because people used to give credit to that team like, oh, their read of when to do things is so smart, and they do it. Like, I actually now, if I had to like put my money on what it was, like, first of all, I do think that somehow that team, it just seems like they were just like the perfect team for Trashy. Like, it seems like he must have just defined so much of the game that they played. And then secondly, like, it doesn't look like there was any genius in that team. It looks like they just had great chemistry, which is why they kept those players together for so long, and they refused to let go. Because when you see all these parts on their own, it just evaporates. All this great read on the game and ability of knowing what to do at the right time when your teammate doesn't. It just goes, and they're just individual players. Because Wonder's a good player, still seems like a perfectly fine player, but there's no magical chemistry or read for what to do at a certain time when other people are doing stuff, and you end up with these disjointed teams. So I just thought an interesting side observation to throw in there.
Sure.
Or some sort of meta narrative that I've applied myself now, which can never be beaten because they can never form again. Okay, come on in that, Kelsey.
Yeah, I do think if you've played with the same roster for a while, it is kind of hard to, and particularly if you've had some success with that particular roster, right? It's hard to then adjust your mindset to a bunch of new teammates who have also had success with those rosters. Like, because no, this is how I did it here, and this helped us win. Yes. Whereas you're going to have someone like, you're going to have Perkz, and you're going to have Yankos, and you're going to have Wonder, all with very different philosophies on what they did that made their teams win, that won't necessarily align. And in Splyce, you could see a very common thread where at like 3-4 minutes, regardless of whether Trashy starts top or bot, he goes top and he uses his new trinket on Wonder's lane. Wonder can play as aggressively as possible. This is not how they want him to play on this team at all. So it's going to take a while. And because Splyce and G2 were teams that were together for 2 years, right? So it's going to take a while.
Okay, but this is the team I want to talk about now, is Splyce, because obviously they're a team where you looked at the roster and you were like, okay, not the craziest roster, but there's some positives here. Let's see how some of these players interact, and maybe they can be kind of more than the names on paper. But all in all, player for player across the line, yeah, pretty decent lineup they've managed to scrape together. Obviously, it certainly helped them. Like, I'm just waiting for when it comes out that like fucking Bare Hands was just like secretly some Splyce guy, because he's the fucking MVP of their offseason. However, he managed to get it so they got Auto Abney. But okay, Cabra, what do you make of the Splyce team?
Splyce is a team that I think is pretty interesting in the sense that I really like the way in which Cersei in English, the jungler, Cersei in Spanish, how he jungles. I really like his style, even though he's not the most mechanically talented guy. I really valued, for example, when they were playing Schalke, he was very smart about baiting Pride Stalker into sweeping places that had absolutely no value for the matchup. And he did this like 2 or 3 times and ended up nullifying a lot of pressure on Toniski, who isn't having the strongest showing. I think he looks pretty iffy at this point. And I really like as well the fact that they seem to have their own ideas about how the game works. And even though the Ivern pick and stuff like that made absolutely no sense, when they can make it work and because they have an idea behind of what they want to do in the game, I really have respect for the team and really like them. But I don't know if they will be good because I don't think the individual talent is that high. I think the side lanes are pretty good, but mechanically Cersei is not very strong, I think, and Niski is struggling a lot. So when you are losing the mid jungle, not losing, but when you're struggling in that sense, you lose control of the map super quickly. So yeah, I'm kind of 50-50 on Splyce.
Okay. What did you think of that game that they won where they did the Ilau pick, and then even though they died 1 million times, they won the fucking game? Like, why is that even a pick? Explain it to me. Come on, like a layman. Explain it like I am 5. Help me.
Illaoi is a champion that basically just does damage. It does more damage the more people come to gank it, which is a dumb mechanic.
It's genius in its own way, though, right?
Yeah, it's but you have to play it a very specific way, and if you go long enough, like it will have enough pressure in side lane that it's really, really obnoxious. And if you let the rest of the team get enough control over Baron that he can kind of like go in and set up his tentacles, it's really, really obnoxious. But it basically just does damage. And people have been playing this into Ornn because this was like one of the counters that people came out with into Ornn, because Ornn can have a ton of map pressure from side lane. So they wanted someone who was able to counter Ornn in side lane. Since then, it's just kind of been weird. I don't know, it's shown up in LPL in some different circumstances than just countering Ornn. But I'm not the biggest Illaoi fan. But I think what is helpful is that Odoamne is actually pretty strong if you give him a good side laning top. Sure. And let him kind of go to timing and demand pressure from there. Because, I mean, there was even the famous Camille game last year where he ends up just like getting an absurd amount of kills after dying repeatedly in lane, and then they carry from super late. So I think that it's a good tactic to put Odo on a like kind of a scaling side lane carry for this particular team. Like I think that that's a good approach that they can take. They haven't really been taking that approach in general. Yeah, Splyce is a weird team for sure. The pieces put together don't make that much sense, like you said.
Like, what do you think of the way they've tried to integrate Odoamne? What's their sense of how to use him, do you think?
Kind of, it's a little finite for my tastes. I'm not going to say a ton because of certain reasons, like we play against them next week, but yeah, it's a little, the way they're using him is really finite, I think, right now.
Right, so. Cabra, you're not involved with anyone who's ever going to play with his teammates, so what do you think they're using Odoamne?
I think there's a problem when you're trying to do like quote unquote wonky stuff or like getting outside of the box with your picks. And for example, they are doing a lot of that in jungle, and they are also showing a bit on the support position with this Silean and this kind of stuff. It really closes the door for doing this for the top lane as well. Like you need some stability to the game and some semblance of coherence in order for this kind of picks to be enabled, right? You cannot just forfeit absolutely control on every lane and just hope to do fine. So I think the problem to try and do the stuff like the Illaoi and such is that maybe the other players are not as comfortable playing standard, particularly Xerxe. But yeah, I think Odoamne, it's not like he has been bad or anything. He has been pretty good, I think, especially team fighting with Ornn and stuff. I think he has achieved a lot for the team. So I don't necessarily take fault with this if they maybe are looking to make the identity a bit more through the bot side than through the Kobe Kasing lane, because I really liked how they used Kasing in the resets to gain control of the enemy jungle. I thought the team was pretty smart about it. So bearing that in mind, I really like giving the team tools to snowball from the bot lane and get the advantages there, because they seem to have a good understanding of it.
Okay. And what about what is the trajectory for this team, Cabra? Where do you see them going?
Anywhere from like 4th to 8th place. I really have no idea where the hell this team is going, because they can look very good in some stuff and then they can look absolutely terrible in other stuff that maybe they will take team fights that make no sense for either the composition or the state of the game and just throw like against ROCCAT. So I'm not really buying it yet. I'm hopeful because they seem smart, but I want them to be more coherent before committing my heart to this team.
Sure. Kelsey, does the fact that they're trying to do all this weird stuff, does that make you be concerned for the actual ceiling of the team when they have to just play beyond just one best of ones, etc.?
I think it has a lot to do with the players they have on their team. But I think the biggest issue is, again, the mid-jungle problem. that they have, because they're almost always going to be in a position where they're coming back from a deficit, which could really hurt them as the split progresses. So,
okay. So let's talk now about the Schalke team, which is another example of the fact that what we've learned about the EU LCS is fuck rosters. It turns out actually paper can't actually win you games. Like there was a great classic saying in European football, right, where one of the all-time great footballers, both player and coach, was a player called Johan Cruyff, who was from the Netherlands, and he actually had a line where he said something like, "I've never seen a bag of money win a game or score a goal," you know, because his point was, you know, just because someone signs all the best players doesn't mean they're going to beat you. I feel like that's like the EU LCS this split, because again, when I looked at this Schalke lineup, okay, sure, it's definitely got like some areas where you're like, how's the connection from this player? Did this player going to work? But just those players alone, you feel like, right, throw them in a server. Come on, they're going to be at least like, you know, like the fourth best team at least. You know, it's surely going to go pretty well. It's gone pretty fucking badly so far. It's not even like they've lost against like the elite teams in the league so far. What do you make of the Schalke team? Like, why this bad start?
It's not. I mean, they're a bit like Misfits because you can't really take much from their first week. Not because they were playing poorly in meta, but because their AD carry was sick, and so they were playing like with fucking Vander AD carry and Boris / Crapo as support. I mean, they
won
like
one
that
game meme, by the
that,
way?
So.
You know the meme where Forgiven posted it and he put like, "I do not approve of this. I'm just like sharing it." And it was that one where it said like, you know, like in the EU LCS, either you become Forgiven or you suck a cock. And it was like it was a picture of Forgiven with Vander's head just photoshopped really badly. And obviously it has to be really badly. If it's too pro, it's going to ruin the meme. But that's straight fire in itself. Okay, yes, you're right. We can obviously give them a pass for that. But beyond that, still some problems, right?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that there's still some issues with this team, for sure. But I think that, I think they're the kind of team that is looking to just strictly play the basic read on the meta, right? And so there can be some hangups when they're against a team that is playing something wonky, or they're against a team that's like super aggressive. So they lost to Splyce playing like an interesting composition. I think that for example, the Caitlyn Zillion bot lane probably threw them off. And then they lost to Vitality today. Yes. They lost to Team Vitality, who we already talked about. So I think that's, and then of course we already discussed their first week. So I'm not necessarily saying that this team is like bad or is in as big of a problems as Fnatic or is having as big of a problems as Fnatic or G2, for example. I think they're just like experiencing the normal growing pains that you'd expect from a roster that is trying to find its way around, because they seem to have like a fairly decent sense of the game and how they want to set up for mid to late game, but they're just having difficulty getting off the ground. So
Cabra, when you have a lineup like this, I would expect, because again, you know, I live my life and conceive my model of the world on the movie Gladiator, which is very much a man's movie, you know, and it's about showing true strength in a very particular manner, a very positive manner actually, but you know, and in doing so, people follow your lead and they kind of fall in line, and then you can operate as a hierarchy, as a structure, and you can achieve all the successes that a team can have, but you got to have people who are like take charge of that. So when I see this lineup, right, I don't care that there was all this hype and people like, oh, you know, a lot of potential with upset. If I was like Vizzy, Chachi and Nukeduck, I'd be like, listen, yeah, you're a good player. Your time will come. This is our team now. You know, listen, did you ever watch season 2, season 3? It's about the solo lanes, motherfucker. Like, it's all about us. The jungler's going to be catering to us all the time. Why is it that all the narrative around this team is all about upset? Actually, everyone's like hyping it like he has to become the next superstar AD carry. It even sounds like in the team they always mention things like this. It sounds as though in their identity as a team, they think that that's like a key essential component. What do you think of, has he lived up to the billing thus far?
I think it's kind of interesting to hear them say that sort of stuff, because upset, whenever I've talked to players, it's like hailed as this teamfight AD carry that maybe he's not looking to snowball the lane super hard, but farm up and play to teamfights. And I think one of the things that Schalke has shown is that they do not necessarily care to use side lanes as a way to set up. They just kind of are very unicorns of love-esque in this kind of way where they hide in a bush and they are like, okay, guys, shh, we will fuck them up. And they are constantly trying to engage as the only way to close the game. So if you are playing a team fighting team where this level of individual skill that they have, obviously the AD carry is going to get propped up, especially if he's already like a farming ADC that wants to team fights. So if they only know how to close games in this manner, their read of Upset as a player, I think, might be over-exaggerated. I'm not saying Upset is bad, but I'm saying if you're constantly team fighting around the 35-minute mark, of course the ADC is going to look fucking sick. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he's bad or anything, but I think the way in which they conceived the game post-mid-game, like post the 20-minute mark, is yet very underdeveloped. I don't think they have many tricks up their sleeves. Even today against Vitality, there was this situation where Chachi had the control of the bottom lane wave, and even when he could rotate and use the 5v4 to get vision control on the river and try to fight Vitality for the national control, they just TP'd and fight it. And if they win, they win. And if they lose, they get fucked. So yeah, I think that this flat style is what's causing them to have such a high read of Upset as a player.
And okay, does that, just as a follow-on, does that mean that you, like, it sounds like you're kind of cautious that maybe they won't be doing so well later on either?
I don't really know. I think every player is very talented, but they have shown a bit of weaknesses, like Bander is getting caught a lot, mm-hmm. not a little, and they are losing a lot from that, and they are also losing a lot from like not having a clear direction on when to do post mid game and even in the mid game as well. But yeah, I'm very cautious because I want to see them develop before putting all my stock onto this Schalke team. If they develop, they can even win the EU LCS for sure. But I think they are a bit flat for my taste right now.
Okay.
See, in the context of like G2 and Fnatic, I think flat is fine as long as they have like as long as they have like a core idea of what they're working from. So Upset is an interesting player because I think he can play some more lane dominant stuff, but he is going to feel most comfortable doing that. I agree with you that I think more of their problems are in using like solo lanes as a bridge to get there. Because if you look at players like Nukeduck and Vizichachi and the teams they've been on most recently, they're going to want to team fight a lot. This is the way it is. But
I mean, they're fucking sick at it, so I understand.
Yeah, exactly. But it's making sure that they have the resources to like be able to push outside lane or to be able to control mid to late game, so that the rest of the team can set up for these fights, and so that they're setting up for these fights consistently well with vision in the area, with like having like good pressure that splits the enemy team. Then that's the problem that they have to get through. This problem seems easier to deal with than some of the problems that G2 and Fnatic seem to be having for me. So,
right, let's talk now about H2K. Now, obviously, H2K is a team where there was a lot of question marks around this lineup when they put it together. Like, I mean, Veteran himself has kind of set himself up as like, yeah, these are players that I wanted, blah, 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 etc. So obviously, there's a strong narrative brewing there that, I mean, obviously, I mean, listen, credit to him, that, as I referenced before, that is how you win Coach of the Split award. So if you want to be considered the best coach, this is how you do it. You get together a bunch of players that no one thinks are going to be really good, and then they turn out to be decent to good, and you place well. So Cabra, start me off here, because obviously we're gonna kind of temper what Kelsey says here. We're gonna start with the good. Let's start with some brightness, some light. Let's see some rays of light. Have aspects of this team looked good?
Be honest. Go
That
for
was a
it.
deep breath. Come on.
I'm sorry. I think this team is looking very bad in a lot of ways. I don't think they have a clear shot caller. I don't think they can really improvise that well, even on the plans they are bringing. I think they are fumbling up executions pretty hard on plays they are starting. So I don't know. I don't see a way in which I hope the team can become very good because I really like Kelsey, but I don't see a way because I think there's also like an identity issue in the thing that they are usually playing to Smithy J as they did in Schalke, but maybe Sheriff and Promise Q are like, if you look at Sheriff's solo queue champion pool, he's playing like mostly stuff like Draven or Kalista, at least he was on the past. So maybe a more lane dominant style would make more sense for them, but if you're committing a lot of resources to the top lane, of course you cannot go with this style. Santorin, I think he still has issues on recognizing when a gank can exist. Not necessarily if he sees the gank, he will go for it, but maybe the problem is on thinking like a minute ahead or okay, we just push the wave, it's going to bounce back, I can come through the lane, or this guy has obviously no vision here, so I can threaten a gank, maybe force something. I think he's still too passive in a lot of respects. So yeah, at the moment, H2K for me is looking pretty bad.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I told you to be honest.
Sorry, mate. It's not your fault. You're not doing any of that shit. You know? Also, what are you talking about? Because you just because you like Kelsey, you hope the team does well. Why don't you just hope that Kelsey does her best and then gets onto a better team? Just, be reasonable, be realistic in how you think of things. Listen, mate, if I've learned one thing about League of Legends and esports, is that what people you like and things you hope for don't happen. Like, life doesn't reward you that way. Like, you know how many times if I'd have been like 10 years younger, I would have thrown fucking monitors out of windows every time Forgiven was in the playoffs. And I was like, it's a game fucking 5 again. No, why? It's like, it doesn't matter what you hope for. It just matters what can actually be done. As I made a video on this very topic, the good thing about games is they don't give a fuck who you are. You can be purely evil, like many TSM members over the years, and yet you can be rewarded with great success. You're still a piece of shit outside the game, but you get the great success in the game. So, okay, Kelsey.
Yep.
Here's the secret to how you do this, okay? Because I have had many scenarios where I've worked with teams or I've had close friends that I've been given advice to on things. You just talk as though you didn't know any of the stuff you know internally.
Okay.
It's not that hard to do. What you do is, if there was an area where you would go down this path because you have an internal, you don't do that. You view it as when you watch the games, you take out the part that you know, and you just tell us what you see as in analyzing the game. Now, here's the thing. You could just be very boring and do that and not give us any sort of controversy whatsoever. I believe like you could play into this wheelhouse if you wanted to, Kelsey, without causing yourself any undue harm. So give us your best attempt.
Oh,
pure
talking
analysis.
About this team?
Yes, pure analysis.
Oh, gosh. This is really hard. I don't know. I mean, yeah, the team has a lot of issues, and I don't really want to blame the players for it because I think that it's something that can be worked on and can be improved. And yeah, a lot of it has to do with retaining pressure around mid and jungle, and that's definitely a full team problem. So yeah, there's my analysis.
With the jungle pressure, like H2K, they are a bit like an octopus with their vision. When they will just get control of one side, and it will be every word. And then they get fucked because 2 minutes later they have no words and they are forced to reset. Even when it's not advantageous for them, or maybe they lose advantage on the mid lane, they can lose mid control easily in this way. And they get punished. So yeah, there's a lot to work on. Actually, if you pull this off, you will be coach of the split, even if you are not even the coach.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Cabra, yeah, come on.
Yeah, I agree that there are a lot of things to work on. And so that's why I don't really I feel like if I'm talking about the game and the players specifically, then I'm kind of flaming them, which I don't want to do because it should it's partly my fault, right? For sure. So
definitely not true, but okay, right? Cabra, explain this to me. So one of the other areas where memes take over and actually start to control people's lives, because by the way, I don't know if anyone's aware of this, but anyone who thinks that like magic isn't real has never looked at the world. Like, in the real world, okay, I could never physically force a 7-foot tall man to give me all his money, let me sleep with his wife, and then let me go on my merry way. But you know what? If I use language, I could make all those things happen. I could just convince him with persuasion, could fuck with his mind, could lead him down a certain path where he thinks I'm his friend. I could do all sorts of things, right? So along these lines, the whole story with Santorin was like, oh, poor Santorin, what a victim of TSM he was, where they made him be just a ward bot and never let him play aggressively because evil Lord Bjergsen in his ivory tower told him never to ward, never wander too far from my realm or whatever, like the fucking out in the dark tower or something. So in this scenario, right, if you remember, people always said, but you understand, when Santorin went to the Challenger Series, then he was fucking carrying and he was a hard carry player. Okay, cool. He's back in the LCS. Let's watch a bit of Santorin. Oh, nothing going on here, right? What is your take on this? Do you think as a player, this is just who he's going to be? Does he just look at the moment? Is he just hesitant in a new team? What would your take be, Cabra?
I think that at this point, maybe he had the option to not be this way, but at this point, I think it will be very hard to get out of that because it's like a bit like with, do you know when someone is quiet and everyone just assumes he's a good guy? Like
exactly.
he never says anything, but he's cool.
Yes.
And he can be like the meanest son of a bitch ever and you will never know. I think Santorin is passive, but a bit of his passivity, like a decent amount, comes from a lack of confidence on his mechanics. So because he only goes for plays where he knows he can execute, he never really looks that terrible. But I think that the problem is not only mentality. So even if maybe in scrims he looks fucking sick, I have no way of knowing this. But even if you could somehow get him into like not a more aggressive style, but maybe he can predict the game better and set up for better ganks, I think he will still be limited by this factor. So I'm not really sold on the Santorin stock, really. I think he will not be much better.
But here's
just from a detached observer perspective, whenever there's an issue with like jungles and ganks and setups and stuff like this is almost always a comms issue. So I think it's about tailoring comms so they work better for the jungle, because jungle it's like really hard to blame the jungle in isolation for problems like this. And I think that Santorin played, like, even on NRG, for example, like people say, okay, yeah, he was super aggressive on Coast in NACS, but on NRG, for example, Santorin was actually like doing a lot of work for this team. And even if NRG was a dumpster fire a lot of ways, I think that they had certain things that worked well for them in comms.
No, I definitely... Sorry?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I definitely... maybe Santorin is getting a lot of attention because he's the most well-known player, but I wouldn't say Santorin is even a top 5 issue on the team. Like, we're talking about him because he's quote-unquote famous, but... I really wouldn't place a lot of the blame on Santorin's performance for the games.
Okay. Well, I mean, listen, if you look on the bright side, I mean, you haven't disappointed my expectations. I had no expectations for this team. And also, this is where you will also learn, this is where there's a skill, there's an art to being a host, Cabra. What you have to do is this, okay?
Yeah.
If I'd have ended on H2K, that'd be so fucking depressing, you know. People would go, oh, bloody hell, I might not watch any of these episodes about EU LCS anymore. Just kidding, as though anyone watches them anyway. But okay, here's what you do, okay? What you do is you go through all the different teams. We went through the teams that were surprising, that were at the top. Okay, how did that go? Yeah. Then we went through all the teams we thought would be good, but aren't doing quite as well as they should be doing. Okay, we went through all them. Now we came to H2K. Okay, big name, but at the same time, lineup that's very unproven. Obviously, the depressing aspect of Kelsey having to try and like get through whatever she was trying to say on the show. But what I've done is, at the very end, you know what you do when something's a bit sort of tragic? You leave with a bit of comedic relief. So I've left Unicorns of Love till the very end of the show, so we can all have a good laugh. We can all just enjoy. Listen, to play is just, it's joy, right? To do whatever you want, to do crazy things, to just be yourself, express yourself. Listen, we're in a world, Cabra, where you're not even allowed to fat shame people. So at this point in time, everything is celebrated. There's nothing wrong in the entire world. Everything's fine. So now tell me this, Cabra. What do you think of Unicorns of Love?
I think that there's one interesting thing about the Unicorns of Love is that I can kind of see maybe I'm just imagining it, but a logic behind the people they acquired, because they again have gone for like a support that has a good engaged sense. The top laner is like a solo queue talent that has potential. You have this.
My God, come on, keep going. I don't want to interrupt the narrative. Keep going, please.
No. Yes. I can see what they're trying to do. I'm not saying I agree. But,
no, I like it. Keep going, though. Keep setting up the narrative. Keep going. Explain the other positions. How do they?
And they have gone as well for a jungler that is used to playing around the top side as well with Cole. So, yeah, I can sort of see what they are trying to do. The thing is that there is some certain problems. Like I felt like Samus and Hylissang were not often on the same page when it came to laning. Like Samus usually wanted to maybe farm and be safe more so than Hylissang. And I think that overall there's a lot of issues with the team in how they can I don't want to say draft, but understand the game in a level that leads to having a good draft. So it bleeds everywhere. It's not just that they will pick necessarily wonky stuff or weird champions, but that these champions are born from a lack of understanding in certain areas. Okay. So maybe this is overall a good decision, because if the team is used to working in this kind of very similar structure, they can bring knowledge from the past and sort of band-aid fix the team a little bit so that it won't be super bad. But I don't know. I'm still on the fence on a lot of stuff. For example, Exile, who in some games looks decent and in some games doesn't. And yeah, overall, I'm not very, very high on the team, but I can see the logic behind the decision.
Wait a minute. Was the narrative that you were setting up there? Because your problem is you set it all up, but you never said the punchline. The punchline was
is Unicorns of Love.
They've created a poor man's Unicorns of Love was the punchline, right? Which is like, why would anyone want to do that? What kind of sadist are you? Like, okay, let's just run it back with a worse version of our team. Oh shit, it's not working. Yeah, what do you expect? Okay, Kelsey, even though he set up that storyline of like, oh, they're doing these things that are similar to before, he still couldn't even get, like at the end of like grinding away on the mill there, he didn't get any quality out of it. There wasn't anything good at the end, like, oh, and that's why they have a chance to win, you know. He just sort of said, I can sort of understand why they've made this terrible, terrible mistake making this lineup. Like, are there any bright spots to this lineup? I mean, they look like a fairly obvious team that should just be bottom of the league the whole time.
Yeah, I think that Exile has maybe one champion that's really good right now. And then every single game they have the same jungle path. Actually, it's almost hilarious to see them do exactly the same jungle path on blue side every single game. But so they're just going for this very, 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 very fixed thing that they know or they think they can do. And it's able to win them some games, or a game. It's able to win them a game. And I think that's about it. Like, this team is very messy. They don't really understand how to play any part of the game. So, yeah, I guess it's fair to say that they have as many problems as H2K. So, good.
It's okay, we've addressed this on past episodes, but you were someone where, I won't say was a fan of, but you enjoyed certain elements of how Trashy played when he was a Splyce player. Yeah. Now, I have to say, by the way, genius move to change your name. Normally, I tell people, don't change your name. That's bad branding. You've built up a whole brand of what you've done before. Genius now, because what he's done now is people can go like, where's that Trashy guy? He used to be really good. This Cole guy's shit. So in a way, it's genius. Now, if I'm him, what I do is in like a year from now, if you get on a good team, just change back to Trashy. Then the whole time they'll be like, fuck, he's back. Yeah, he's out of retirement. And then he can pull like a Cabra here, like, yep, I'm a rookie in the league. Like, you know. So is there a disconnect between Cold and the rest of the team, do you think, Kelsey?
I think that Cold is probably the brightest spot on the team, and he's, even though like his path is very predictable, people are still struggling to counter it. So yeah, I think he's probably the best part of that team right now.
And elsewhere, right, bearing in mind they're losing all these games now, where we've literally explained for so many teams about how hard it is to say that the teams that are winning will continue because of the current meta, and some of the teams that are losing, okay, once they get their identity together, probably will assert themselves and become the top teams. If you're losing all the games in the meta that props up all the shit teams, it's not really very good, is it? Like, that's that's a pretty depressing sort of premise going forwards. Okay, answer this. If the meta changes to become more along the lines of bot lane can get kills, bot lane can pressure more, or people don't have stopwatches all over the place, you can dive them more, will this team actually, in some sense, would they have a chance to do better? Do they have the pieces to do better? Would their style fit better?
No, I don't even think they're trying to play that way. I think they're just... Yeah, I think as long as you can't deny them pressure mid, they'll play off of red buff invades. And that's basically what they're going for.
Yeah, a good question, I think, about the team is, are they trying to play any way? Because I sense a lot of disconnection between what the bot lane is trying to do and what the rest of the map is trying to do, both in terms of draft and lane assignments. So, yeah, I don't really know. Maybe they can figure it out. I don't think the players individually are looking particularly bad. I think Samus is looking decent, and so is White Knight. Exilia and Totoro maybe not so much, but they can try. I don't know if they can do anything, honestly.
Let's just end on that then. just absolute despair. Just no hope. That's it. The end. Unicorns love. This is you realise this was the end game of Unicorns love at all points. They were always going to go to this point in time because guess what? They wanted to play the chaos game. This is entropy, motherfucker. Everything's broken down, isn't it?